Welcome back to my channel and this episode where I want to speak reflectively about the student protests, what we're seeing, what we've been speaking about, and how the reporting is positioning things for all of us now since media literacy, political literacy, critical thinking is so important here on this channel. We don't aim to be perfect at it, but it is important. It's part of the mission and the objective of my channel to share information and analysis and have conversations where we aren't getting so polarized and are able to step back and zoom out. And I say zoom out a lot. What's quite interesting with the student protests is that first and foremost, let's look at Columbia University. So it kicks off, and the administration at Columbia are the ones who called in the NYPD first. What's interesting, though, is that the NYPD have actually said that the protesters at that time were non-violent. Why is there such a push to suppress the protests? And that push is coming mainly from the right. It's odd if you think about protests and the right to protest, is that surely as an academic institution, you would want to preserve the right for your students, your young, flourishing minds, to have the right to express themselves, articulate themselves, and speak up, speak out. The issue is humanitarian. Let's begin with that. Now, if on the whole the protests are non-violent, then surely the administration, all of the grown-ups, have a job to do to see where that line has gotten blurred. If on the whole the protesters are non-violent, yet there is a segment that isn't, there's still a line. And if the line's getting blurred, surely there's a way to approach this without punishing everyone, without removing the right to expression at the cost of preserving the peace. Because what we're seeing is not peace being preserved, it's the opposite. We're seeing more anger, more aggression. We're seeing a protest turn into a resistance against those who wish to remove the right to protest. Now, students are passionate, and we've had conversations in the streams about students and trends, about students being aware of one struggle and not so much of the other. Judgment aside, student minds are hungry for information. They are exercising their brains constantly. They are active. But let's not condescend and let's not patronize students as being these young people who don't have anything better to do. When we know student protests have historically been very powerful. So now that we're seeing student protests spread more and more, are we going to see there being an infringement on their right to protest, on their right to collect, on anyone's right to collect? I would always recommend that we take a step back and look at this as perhaps a case study that you could see replicated in other parts of life or affecting other demographics. How can we be okay with suppressing anyone's right to express themselves? And if we zoom out even more, of course, there's going to be a segment of people who are going to express themselves in an incorrect or violent way. Of course, there will be that in every pocket of society. Does that mean that we should now stamp out protest altogether because it's inconvenient for some or it is offensive? Why is it that those who are pushing so hard against the student protesters are the same people who have for a long time asked for their freedom to speak and express themselves and their principles to be protected? Again, we hear this, and this is not a new idea or my idea, but freedom of speech for some and not for others. We're going into very dangerous territory, I think, when we allow for people to articulate so powerfully and publicly how people shouldn't have certain freedoms. Somebody you didn't elect, who doesn't lead you or your nation, has a say over your rights. How how is this being accepted? We've seen already in the US State Department briefings how this was explained away. How, and I'm paraphrasing here, other nations' leaders have opinions. We cannot control the opinions. But the opinion given by Netanyahu wasn't just a thought of the day. It was a very powerful, authoritative statement that was made to influence. What we've seen is a stampede over student voice. It doesn't matter where you sit on the political spectrum or on the issue. The point is this: if you are endorsing the suppression of a student's right to protest, then you're essentially signing the death warrant for your own right to express and protest. Once you've allowed this to be taken away, you cannot claim to be living in a democracy. Thanks for listening. More will be covered in my weekly streams, and I'll see you in the next one.